Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Simone Gold with The Gold Report. And please like, share, and subscribe. And so you never miss an episode, and share this with everybody. So I wanted to talk just for a few minutes today on a subject that really came up so much in the last 4 years. And that, of course, is the vaccine issues. Now, all of you know me as a doctor, and some of you do remember that I'm a lawyer, but I am equally both. And this vaccine issue has been fascinating as a doctor and a lawyer, and I'm going to explain why. So at the end of 2020, the COVID shots were released, and they were named and called to be vaccines. This was very troublesome to me as a physician, because the common understanding of what a vaccine is to stop the transmission of a disease between people, right? That's just the common understanding. And if I asked any man on the street what they thought a vaccine did, that's what they would tell you. They would tell you, oh, well, then you won't get sick with the thing. And it's like a communicable disease like influenza. And if I take the flu shot, I shouldn't get influenza, et cetera. I always knew as an emergency physician that, for example, the influenza shot clearly was ineffective. I knew that because I saw everybody in the ER, and patients every day during the winter seasons would come into the hospital with influenza, and almost without exception, they all had taken the influenza shot. So it was clear to me it was ineffective, but I honestly didn't give it that much thought. I thought it was kind of a worthless vaccine, but I really didn't think about if it was dangerous or not, et cetera. COVID has opened my eyes to the fact that the scientific community has been misleading the public in horrific ways on the whole issue of vaccines. I'm not the best expert on that. I would say that Attorney Aaron Siri is a phenomenal expert on the subject, but I've done enough research to know that it's a sleight of hand, that the government is misleading us in terms of the data that supports how effective vaccines are and also how safe vaccines are. In addition, there's been a lot of sleight of hand, bait and switch, I would say, in our government's use of language around the word vaccine. So I'm going to walk you through what I mean about that. So again, traditionally, we all thought of vaccines as being something that stopped the interpersonal transmission of a virus or an illness that could make people sick. Well, that was true, but I'm going to read you the different definitions of vaccine, how the CDC has changed that over time. So prior to 2015, so this is long before COVID, the CDC definition of vaccine was what we all commonly understood it. It was defined as injection of a killed or weakened infectious organism in order to prevent a disease. So me growing up as a physician and just an American living in our society, that's what I thought a vaccine did. You took a shot of something. I knew as a doctor that most versions of vaccines were weakened version of the virus or the disease. And when your body was exposed to a weakened version of the virus or disease, your body would respond aggressively to it and learn how to fight it off and prevent the disease. That's always what I thought vaccines were. And indeed, that more or less matched the definition that the CDC used prior to 2015. Starting in 2015, the CDC changed the definition from preventing a disease to producing immunity to a disease. That may not seem like a huge difference, but it really is a huge difference. One is prevention. The other is immunity, or kind of, let's say, protection. Prevention is much, much stronger word than immunity. This mattered to me a lot as a physician because the legal standard of quote unquote forcing a person to take a vaccine rests upon the government or the public interest in reducing communicable diseases across an entire population. So if we have a shot that could stop the transmission of diseases amongst people, you could imagine that that would be possibly a legitimate thing for the government to have an interest in. At least you can make a case. You could certainly make a case that they don't, that people always have a sovereign right over their own body no matter what. But you could at least argue that if something stopped the interpersonal transmission amongst people, that our government could get a say in that would be relevant. And that's kind of where we were as a society. But note, they changed the definition in 2015 to say a vaccine isn't that high threshold of preventing a disease. A vaccine is only this modest threshold of giving you immunity, whatever, that means. It's a lot more vague than the word prevention. Okay, that's where we were in 2015 until COVID. After COVID, and the shots were absolute garbage in terms of stopping the interpersonal transmission. They never did. So in 2021, the CDC very quietly changed the definition again. So we went from preventing a disease to immunity to a disease to this definition, introducing a vaccine into the body to produce protection from a disease. So we went from prevention, immunity, to protection. What is protection? Protection could be mild. Protection could be strong. It could be very mild. So if the government comes up with a vaccine that gives you, mild protection against a disease, should the government then be able to force you to take it if all the effect is a mild protection against a disease? I don't think so. I think a person has a stronger human individual right than that. So this is critical as a legal matter. As a legal matter, the most important legal case on vaccine law was more than 100 years ago. And that was a Supreme Court case called Jacobson. And in Jacobson, the Supreme Court held that if a government could technically force a person to take a vaccine with the following limits. The person could opt out by paying a financial penalty. The person could fill out an exemption, like a religious exemption. But the most important finding of the Jacobson case was that the Supreme Court acknowledged that the purpose of taking the shot was to stop the transmission of disease between people. In other words, there's no right for the government to go in and force anyone else to take a shot or anything, a medication, if it doesn't stop the interpersonal transmission of a disease. The government acknowledged that if it's only to make your personal situation better, the government has no business in that, has no interest in that. That's also very long-standing law by the Supreme Court. There's a very famous case called Cruzan, the United States Supreme Court case, and that clearly establishes what we've always known to be true in the common law, which is a person has an absolute sovereignty over their own body. A person cannot be forced to take medication against their will. That's absolute violative of all American law, federal, state, etc. So the question of if something is only personal treatment or if it stops interpersonal transmission of disease is a critical legal distinction. The reason this is so important, why I'm talking about it now, is because the judges are operating, as are most Americans, with an old-fashioned understanding of what the CDC is calling a vaccine. So vaccine law by the judges, they believe it to apply to shots that are reducing interpersonal transmission. But by the CDC's own words, that's no longer what a vaccine is. A vaccine can just be something that produces some protection against a disease. Well, that's personal treatment choice only. So we have to present this constantly to judges to make sure that they understand that the definition of vaccine no longer supports a right of the government to force somebody to take a vaccine, because the definition now really means little more than medical treatment. And it gets a little bit worse. A few months ago, if you happen to look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which is probably the most famous dictionary worldwide, for the very, very first time ever, they've included the concept of an mRNA component to the definition of vaccine. Their definition says a vaccine includes preparation of a genetic material such as mRNA. I found this to be incredibly shocking that we're just kind of slipping in a change of language, hoping other people don't notice, hoping judges don't notice, and many people still have a warm, fuzzy feeling when they hear the word vaccine. Oh, a vaccine is great. It really protects me. Well, really, does it protect you? Does it prevent the disease? Is it giving you immunity from the disease? Is it giving you some protection against the disease? Or is it just an mRNA shot? It could be any of those things. So we have to really be on guard. In my opinion, this is a case, like the story where you put a frog into water, and if the water's boiling hot, the frog will jump out. But if you put the frog in water and you just slowly heat up the water, it's rumored that the frog will just stay there until it's boiled to death. So we don't notice these things that happen slowly. So I'm sharing with you today that they have slowly changed the definition of the word vaccine, hoping that you, the American people, aren't noticing. And I'm here to give you that information. Thank you so much for watching today. Please share this information on the changing definition of vaccines with everyone you can think of. Please watch The Gold Report. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.